Chapter 1. The Dinner Table Betrayal. The restaurant glowed with soft amber light, its walls lined with flickering candles that caught on glassware and polished cutlery. The hum of chatter rose and fell like a tide, the occasional burst of laughter rolling from other tables. I adjusted the collar of my shirt, tugged it at once, then folded my hands in my lap. I had dressed carefully for tonight, navy button-down, pressed slacks, polished shoes. It wasn't a formal occasion, but something in me wanted to make a good impression. It wasn't lost on me that I was the odd one out here. The dinner wasn't really for me. It was for Serena. My wife sat across the table, radiant as ever. Her hair was swept back in glossy waves, her lips painted a bold crimson that matched the silk of her dress. She looked like she belonged here, in this trendy downtown bistro, surrounded by clinking glasses and confident laughter. Beside her sat her friends, Zara and Talia. Both had the kind of stylish ease that always made me feel slightly underdressed no matter how carefully I prepared. Zara was sharp, with an angular bob and a habit of leaning forward with her elbows on the table, as though every conversation needed her full, immediate attention. Talia, softer in tone and demeanor, laughed easily and often, her bracelets clinking musically whenever she lifted her wine glass. They were Serena's world, her closest friends. I met them a handful of times before, but always in passing, a wave at the door, a polite "how are you" at a party. Tonight was different. Tonight, I was supposed to belong at this table, as part of Serena's life, not just an accessory to it. At first, the atmosphere was warm enough. Zara told a story about a disastrous client at work, complete with animated hand gestures and a flawless impersonation of the client's nasally drawl. Talia chimed in with her own tale about getting lost in traffic and nearly missing a meeting, her laughter infectious enough to draw chuckles from the table beside us. I listened, smiled, contributed where I could. I didn't mind being the quieter one. I'd always been more observer than participant. My role was simple: enjoy the food, laugh at the right places, and give Serena space to shine among her friends. And she did shine. Her laugh filled the room. Her smile was magnetic, her charm undeniable. For a while it felt almost good, comfortable. I sipped my drink, leaned back, and thought maybe this evening would pass without incident. But then Talia tilted her head, eyes glimmering with curiosity, and asked the question that would splinter the night. "So," she said, setting her glass down, "how did you two meet, anyway?" I opened my mouth. It was a simple story, really. Boy meets girl at a campus library, awkward conversation about a shared class, a coffee date that stretched into hours. It was ours, a small, imperfect beginning that had grown into a life. I wanted to tell it, but Serena cut in before I could speak. "Oh God," she groaned, rolling her eyes so dramatically Zara let out a chuckle in anticipation. "You want to hear that? Fine." She leaned back, waving a manicured hand toward me. He basically begged me to date him. The table erupted in laughter. Zara smirked. Talia giggled. Even the waiter passing by allowed himself a crooked smile. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I tried to laugh along, but it caught in my throat, more cough than chuckle. Serena wasn't done. She leaned forward now, resting her chin on her hand, eyes glittering with a mischief that felt sharp. Seriously, he was desperate. Weak. Pathetic, really. I only said yes because, honestly, I was bored. Another ripple of laughter. Zara clinked her glass against Talia's. I froze. For a second, I wasn't even sure I'd heard her right. Pathetic? Weak? The words hung in the air, heavy, sharp, cutting deeper than I expected. I caught Talia's eye. She looked slightly uncomfortable now, but still smiled, as though afraid to break the rhythm of the joke. I shifted in my seat, tried to steady my voice. "That's not exactly." Serena cut me off with a laugh. "Oh, don't get all serious," she said, brushing her hand through the air as though swatting away a fly. "I mean, come on. Look at him. Desperate, weak, and lucky I was bored. That's the truth, isn't it?" She looked straight at me then, daring me to disagree. The table leaned toward her, not me. Their smiles weren't cruel. Not really. They were complicit, entertained, caught in her orbit. I swallowed hard. my fingers curling around the edge of the tablecloth. Serena smirked, leaned back in her chair, and delivered the final blow. "Honestly," she said, her voice carrying over the clinking dishes around us, "I'm only still with him because I don't have the energy to train someone hotter." Zara's mouth dropped open in mock shock. "Ouch, girl," she laughed, clapping her hand against the table. Talia shook her head, laughing nervously. And then Serena, as if that wasn't enough, leaned in close, eyes locking on mine like a predator cornering prey. Her lips curved into a smile, so sweet it was poisonous. "Let's be real," she said softly, almost intimately, though loud enough for everyone to hear. "No one else even wants him." The laughter that followed seemed distant, muffled, like I was underwater. My ears rang, my vision tunneled, narrowing until all I could see was her smirk across the table. Something inside me broke. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it snapped back into place after being bent for so long. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I didn't plead for dignity in front of her friends. Instead, I reached for my glass of wine. Slowly, deliberately, I lifted it from the table. The stem was cool against my fingers, the liquid inside catching the candlelight as I raised it. Serena tilted her head, curiosity flashing across her face for the briefest moment. Zara's laughter faltered. Talia's eyes widened. Without a word, I tipped the glass forward. The wine poured in a dark, shimmering arc, cascading over Serena's perfect hair, her flawless makeup, her silk dress. Gasps rippled through the table. Chairs scraped. The chatter of the restaurant dimmed as heads turned toward us. Serena froze, her smile gone, replaced by shock as the wine dripped from her chin and pooled onto her lap. I set the empty glass down gently, the sound of it touching the table impossibly loud in the silence that followed. Then I stood, pulled my wallet from my pocket, laid a few crisp bills on the table, enough for my meal, enough for the tip. And without a word, without so much as a glance back, I turned and walked away. Chapter 2, The Drive into Silence. The night air hit me as soon as I stepped out of the restaurant. It was cooler than I expected, crisp enough to sting my lungs a little with each breath. Behind me, the muffled noise of laughter, clinking plates, and startled whispers still floated through the restaurant's open door. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see her face, didn't want to see her scrambling to wipe wine from her perfect hair or watch her friends lean in, whispering in shock. I walked straight to the car, my shoes echoing on the pavement. Each step felt heavier than the last, but strangely steady, like I was moving forward in a way I hadn't in years. I slid into the driver's seat and closed the door. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring through the windshield at nothing. My heart wasn't racing the way I thought it would be. I wasn't trembling with rage or drowning in shame. Instead, there was stillness. I turned the key, and the engine hummed to life. The headlights spilled across the dark street, and I pulled away without any sense of direction. I wasn't heading home, and I certainly wasn't going back inside. I just drove. The city stretched around me, glowing with neon signs and stoplights. Storefronts flickered past in blurs of color. Late-night diners, closed boutiques, a lonely gas station with a bored attendant leaning against the counter. The streets were mostly quiet, traffic thin at this hour. It suited me. As I drove, memories started to surface, uninvited. Not the good ones, the small cruelties, the casual humiliations that I had buried for years. I remembered a barbecue 2 summers ago. Someone had asked Serena how I was doing at work, and she had laughed lightly, saying, "He's not exactly climbing the ladder, but hey, someone's got to pay the bills, right?" Everyone chuckled, including me, though the words stung. Another time, at her office party, she introduced me as the man who can't cook to save his life, but at least he takes out the trash. I had laughed then, too, embarrassed but unwilling to spoil the evening. And at home, the small sighs, the eye rolls, the dismissive you wouldn't understand whenever I tried to weigh in on something important to her. Each one tiny, almost harmless on its own. But together they had built something heavy. The phone on the passenger seat buzzed, snapping me out of the spiral. The screen lit up with her name, Serena. I let it buzz until it stopped. A second later, it vibrated again, this time a message. I glanced down at the preview. What the hell was that? You embarrassed me in front of my friends. I clenched my jaw, turned the phone face down. The buzzing stopped for a beat, then started again. Call after call, message after message. Do you have any idea how stupid you made me look? Get back here now. Don't walk away from me like some coward. Each vibration rattled against the leather seat, filling the car with an angry, insistent energy that felt almost comical. I had just been called desperate and weak in front of strangers, but somehow she was the victim. I laughed under my breath. It wasn't bitter, not even angry. It was hollow, disbelieving. The messages kept coming. The screen glowed in the dark like an accusation. If you think this is funny, you're wrong. You're making a scene. Grow up. Come back. I ignored them. Instead, I turned down an empty road that curved toward the outskirts of the city. The street lamps grew fewer, the noise of nightlife faded, and soon I was driving along the quiet edge of the waterfront. The dark water stretched endlessly, reflecting the faint orange glow of the city skyline. I pulled over at a small turnout near the pier, killed the engine, and just sat. The quiet was immense, broken only by the distant lap of waves against the rocks. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't touch it. I gripped the wheel, staring at the water. For years, I'd told myself it was fine, that the jokes, the barbs, the eye rolls were just her way, that I was being sensitive, that love was about compromise, about patience. I had confused endurance with devotion. I had told myself that staying meant strength. But sitting there with the cool night air seeping through the cracked window and the faint salt of the sea on my tongue, I felt something I hadn't in years. Clarity. It was over. Not just the dinner. Not just the fight. The marriage. The performance. The slow erosion of who I was. And with that realization came an unusual calm. It wasn't the storm I'd expected. No rage. No grief tearing me apart. Just a quiet certainty, like setting down a weight I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten what freedom felt like. The phone buzzed again, one final desperate attempt. I picked it up this time, not to answer, but to silence it. Her last message glared at me on the screen. You're nothing without me. I stared at the words for a long moment. Then I set the phone back down, face first, and turned my gaze back to the water. I didn't know where I was going to go tomorrow, or how exactly I would untangle the mess of a shared life. But tonight, sitting there, I knew one thing for certain. I was done. Eventually, I started the car again. The engine hummed quietly, the headlights cutting a narrow path back toward the city. I didn't rush. I let the road lead me slowly home, my mind uncharacteristically quiet. When I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed dark and still. Her car wasn't there yet. Maybe she was still out with Zara and Talia, spinning her own version of what happened. I didn't care. I unlocked the front door, slipped inside, and didn't even bother with the upstairs bedroom. Instead, I walked straight to the den. The old sofa sagged in the middle, the blanket draped over its back worn thin, but when I lay down and pulled it over me, it felt like the most comfortable bed I'd ever known. For the first time in years, I slept without restlessness, without tension in my chest, without waiting for the next jab or sigh. The silence of the den wrapped around me like a shield, and I slept in peace. Chapter 3, 3 Lists. Morning sunlight crept into the den in fractured lines, slipping through the blinds and cutting across my face. I blinked awake slowly, my back stiff on the old sofa. For a moment, disoriented, I forgot where I was. Then it came rushing back, the dinner, the humiliation, the wine cascading over Serena's perfect hair. The memory should have twisted my stomach, but instead, a strange calm lingered. For the first time in years, I hadn't tossed and turned through the night. No muffled arguments. No quiet sighs from the other side of the bed. Just sleep. I sat up, rubbing the stiffness from my neck, and looked around the den. It smelled faintly of dust and wood polish. The shelves were cluttered with Serena's things, framed photos, candles she'd never lit, decorative books she never read. None of it was mine. That thought landed heavier than I expected. I padded into the kitchen, bare feet against the cold floor. The house was silent. Serena hadn't come home, or if she had, she'd gone straight upstairs without a word. A small part of me braced for a confrontation, but none came. Instead, I made coffee. The ritual steadied me. The clink of the spoon, the gurgle of the machine, the bitter scent rising with the steam. I sat at the table with a legal pad in front of me and stared at the blank page. Somewhere in my chest, a voice spoke clearly, almost like instruction. Write it down. So I did. At the top of the page, I scrawled in bold letters. What mine? I paused, pen hovering. What was mine? I glanced around the kitchen. The stainless steel appliances? No, she'd picked those. The minimalist chairs? Hers. The art on the walls? All hers. I thought harder. My laptop tucked in my bag. A few clothes. My tools in the garage. The old guitar I never played anymore, but couldn't let go of. I started writing. Laptop, tool, set, guitar, a handful of books my grandfather's watch, that was it. 5 items. In a house filled with polished surfaces and carefully curated decor, I could only claim 5 things as truly mine. The pen hovered again, my throat tight. I pushed the page aside and flipped to a clean sheet. This time I wrote. What was real? The words, unleash something. My hand moved faster, anger and memory pouring out as ink. You wouldn't understand, said whenever I tried to contribute to her conversations. The way she rolled her eyes when I mentioned my work. The laugh at the barbecue when she said I wasn't ambitious. The introduction at her office party. He's the guy who takes out the trash. Her silence whenever I needed support, job interviews, family funerals, the moments that mattered. Last night, no one else even wants him. Each line I wrote felt like pressing on a bruise, but instead of pain, I felt release. I saw it clearly now, the pattern I'd ignored, excused, explained away. For years, I had told myself it was teasing, her humor, her way of being sharp. But the list made it undeniable. It hadn't been love for a long time. It had been erosion. The page filled, the lines tilting as my hand shook with momentum. When I finally dropped the pen, I stared at what I'd written until the words blurred. I turned to the last blank page and sat for a long time before writing the heading. Exit moves. The 2 words steadied me. This wasn't just about looking back anymore. It was about looking forward. I wrote methodically, bullet by bullet. Search for apartments. Start small, studio is fine. Call lawyer, get advice on separation, maybe divorce. Separate bank account. Direct deposit switched. Collect essentials. Laptop, documents, clothes. Pack quietly, avoid confrontation. Stay with Adrian temporarily if needed. The list looked almost businesslike, as if I were preparing for a project at work. But it was my life. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting, I was planning. The scrape of footsteps above me made me pause. Serena was home after all. I heard the faint creak of the bathroom door, then silence again. She hadn't come downstairs. She hadn't said a word. I half expected her to storm into the kitchen, waving her phone, demanding an explanation for the messages I had ignored. But no, nothing. Just distance. The silence between us was louder than shouting. I looked back at my lists. 3 pages, each one sharper, truer, more damning than the last. Coffee gone cold, I sat back, staring at my hands. They were trembling slightly, though I didn't feel afraid. Just unsteady, like a man stepping on a new ground after years at sea. My gaze fell to my left hand. The wedding ring glinted faintly in the morning light, catching on the ridges of my skin. I had worn it for years, never once taking it off. It had become more than a band of gold. It was habit, identity, a silent declaration. I belonged to someone. I'm hers. But looking at it now, it felt less like a bond and more like a shackle. Slowly, almost reverently, I twisted it. My fingers resisted at first. The metal had molded to me over time. But with a small tug, it slipped free. The ring sat in my palm, small and gleaming, absurdly light for the weight it carried. I placed down the table beside the lists. For a long moment, I just stared. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift. Chapter 4, The Goodbye Note. The house was silent that night, the kind of silence that pressed against my ears until I could hear nothing but the sound of my own breathing. Serena hadn't spoken a word to me all day. Her footsteps had drifted upstairs early in the evening, the slam of the bedroom door echoing down the hall. I had stayed downstairs, moving slowly, deliberately, waiting for the cover of midnight. When the clock on the wall struck 12, I rose from the den sofa where I'd been sitting in the dark, a packed stillness in my chest. It was time. The lists I'd written that morning lay folded in my jacket pocket. They had burned against my chest all day, each word seared into me, propelling me forward. Now, they felt less like paper and more like permission. I moved quietly through the house, careful with each step, though the old floorboards creaked no matter how I tried. In the bedroom, I could hear the faint rhythm of her breathing, steady even. She was asleep. Good. I slipped into the guest room, retrieved my duffel bag from the closet, and began. Packing was easier than I thought it would be. Essentials only. I started with the clothes I actually wore, not the shirt she had bought for me. The ones she said made me look less boring. I packed the jeans that were frayed but comfortable, the jackets that carried memories of long drives, the t-shirts that still smelled faintly of old concerts. Next, my laptop, charger, and a stack of important documents, passport, bank statements, the deed copy from my grandfather's house. Those I tucked into a folder and slid into the bottom of the bag. I went to the garage and retrieved my tool set, wrapping the metal carefully so it wouldn't rattle. Then, almost as an afterthought, I reached for the guitar case in the corner. The black vinyl cover was worn and cracked, but the instrument inside had been with me since college. I hadn't played in years, but it was mine. I leaned it by the door. The rest of the house I left untouched. The furniture, the carefully curated decor, the endless knickknacks she had bought to project an image, all hers. When the bag was zipped, I stood in the kitchen under the soft glow of the under-cabinet lights. The countertop gleamed, spotless, cold. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ring. The band glinted faintly, catching the light. I set it gently on the counter. For a long moment, I stared at it lying there, absurdly small against the expanse of granite. Then I pulled a sheet of paper from a notepad by the fridge, the one where we usually scribble grocery lists. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote, but the words flowed clean, simple, undeniable. You made a public choice. I made a private one. Goodbye. I placed the note beside the ring. Together, they looked like punctuation at the end of a sentence. I exhaled, long and heavy, and closed my eyes. For a moment, grief swelled in me like a tide. Years of history, of shared spaces and shared beds, of laughter that once felt real, of love, or what I thought was love, slipped through me. But beneath it was something steadier. Relief. I picked up the duffel, slung the strap over my shoulder, grabbed the guitar case, and stepped toward the door. The drive was quiet. The roads were mostly empty at that hour, the occasional headlights sweeping past like ghosts. The hum of the engine filled the silence, and for once, I didn't feel the need to drown it with music or talk radio. I let the stillness sit with me. Adrian's apartment was on the other side of town, in an older building with brick walls and ivy climbing up the side. We'd been friends for nearly 15 years. He was the kind of man who didn't need explanations. He just showed up when you needed him. I pulled into the lot, parked beneath a flickering street lamp, and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. The bag and guitar sat in the passenger seat, silent witnesses to my decision. Finally, I climbed out, shouldering the weight of my things, and buzzed his apartment number. The intercom crackled. Yeah. His voice was groggy but familiar. It's me, I said, my throat tighter than I wanted it to be. Sorry, it's late. I didn't know where else. The line cut off with a buzz, the door unlocking before I could finish. I climbed the narrow staircase, my footsteps heavy with both exhaustion and finality. By the time I reached his door, it was already open. Adrian stood there barefoot, hair sticking up in every direction, wearing a faded t-shirt and sweatpants. His eyes widened at the sight of the duffel and guitar, but he didn't ask. He just stepped aside. Come in. I entered, setting the bag down carefully by the wall. His apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old books, a comforting, lived-in scent. Adrian closed the door and turned to me, his expression steady. You hungry? Thirsty? I shook my head. My throat felt thick, clogged with too many words I didn't know how to say. He nodded, like he'd expected that. Couch is yours. Blankets in a closet. No questions tonight. Something in my chest broke at that. No questions tonight. I nodded mutely, my eyes burning. Thanks, I managed. He gave me a small smile, the kind that carried no judgment. You do the same for me. I lowered myself onto his couch, the cushions sagging in a way that felt oddly welcoming. The guitar leaned against the wall beside me, the duffel within reach. As I sat there, in the quiet safety of his apartment, grief and relief twined inside me like two vines, one pulling down, the other lifting up. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel both. Chapter 5, Ripples Among Friends. News, I learned, travels faster than shame. It had been only 3 days since the dinner, since the glass of wine over her head, since the note and the ring left gleaming on the counter. Yet somehow, by the time I dared check my phone again, the incident had made its way through the veins of our social circle. Not just the people who were there, but the ones who weren't. I saw the evidence in the messages piling in. Half curious, half concerned. Hey, I heard something happened at dinner. Are you okay? Bro, what's this about you storming out? Man, you really did that. I didn't answer most of them. I didn't feel like defending myself. Not when the truth would just be twisted into another version of her story. Adrian noticed my phone buzzing endlessly on the coffee table. He sat across from me, sipping his coffee slowly, his eyes flicking between me and the device. You gonna deal with that? Not yet. I muttered, rubbing my forehead. I'm not ready for their questions. They'll keep asking until you are, he said evenly. But you don't owe anyone an explanation. Not anymore. He was right, of course. Still, the silence I gave people only seemed to make the rumors grow louder. It was Zara who called first. Her number flashed across the screen late one afternoon, and after a long pause, I finally picked up. Her voice came fast, a little too bright. Hey, I wanted to check on you. I've been hearing all kinds of things. I leaned back on Adrian's couch, staring at the ceiling. Depend what you've heard. That at dinner, well, that Serena made some jokes, and maybe they went too far, and you, Zara hesitated, lowering her voice. You dumped a drink on her and walked out. That's not inaccurate, I said flatly. There was a pause on the line. I could hear her exhale. Look, you know Serena, she jokes like that all the time. You've laughed with us before. Have I? My voice was sharper than I intended. Or did I just smile so I wouldn't look like a fool in front of her friends? Another pause. This one longer. Maybe both, Zara admitted finally. Her tone softened. I won't lie, it was cruel. The way she said it. We laughed because we didn't know how else to react. I swallowed, the words sticking in my throat. She made me a punchline. I know. Zara's voice wavered. At first, I told myself it was just Serena being Serena. But the more I think about it, the less funny it feels. Honestly, I've been keeping some distance since that night. That surprised me. Zara and Serena had been close, shopping trips, brunches, weekend away. For Zara to pull back, it meant something. Thank you, I said quietly. Don't thank me, she replied. Just take care of yourself, okay? When the call ended, I sat in silence, her words echoing. Serena being Serena. How many times had that phrase been used to excuse her? Talia reached out a day later, her tone different. She invited me for coffee, claiming she wanted to clear the air. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a small cafe downtown. Talia arrived in her usual bright colors, her bracelets jingling as she sat across from me. She smiled, but it was awkward. So quite the scene, huh? I stir my coffee, watching the swirl. That's one way to put it. Look, she said, leaning in. I'll be honest. It wasn't her best moment. She went too far. Too far. I raised an eyebrow. Talia bit her lip. It was cruel. I won't deny that. But you know Serena. That's just her humor. She teases, she pushes buttons. It's how she is. I laughed bitterly. And that makes it okay? I didn't say that. She sighed, fiddling with her spoon. I guess I've just gotten used to it. We all have. When she pokes fun at us, we roll with it. It's easier. There's again. Normalized. Accepted. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the discomfort behind her smile. Maybe she knew it was wrong. Maybe she just didn't want to be the one to say it out loud. You laughed, I said quietly. She flinched. I know, and I regret it. But in the moment, she trailed off, her eyes dropping to her cup. It felt safer to laugh than to call her out. Her honesty stung, but I respected it. When the conversation ended, I walked out into the chill of late afternoon with a realization heavy on my shoulders. This wasn't just about one dinner. This was years of small humiliations, brushed off as jokes. Years of my silence, making it easier for everyone else to stay silent too. Back at Adrian's place, I slumped onto the couch, relaying the conversations. He listened without interrupting, his expression calm but firm. "So, Zara's pulling away," he said, "and Talia admits it was cruel, but still excuses it." "Exactly." I rub my temples. And all I can think is, how many times did I let this happen? How many times did I let her cut me down in front of them, in front of anyone, and just smiled? Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You want the truth?" I nodded. "You taught them it was normal," he said simply. "Not just her. Them too. Every time you laughed it off, every time you swallowed it, instead of pushing back, you told them it was okay." His words hit like a punch, but not an unfair one. "So what now?" I asked, my voice low. "Now," he said, leaning back, "you stop teaching them that. You've already started. Walking out was the first real line you've drawn in years. Don't erase it." I stared at him, the weight of his words settling deep in my chest. For the first time, I saw how much of my silence had been complicity. Adrian's gaze softened. "You can't control what she does, or how they excuse it, but you can control you. Stay firm. Don't let her pull you back in." I sat there, letting the words anchor me. Around us, the hum of the apartment was steady, grounding. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was shrinking under the weight of her words. Instead, I felt myself standing taller. Chapter 6, The Mother's Call. The phone rang in the middle of the afternoon, slicing through the quiet of Adrian's apartment. I glanced at the screen and froze. Diane Morrison, Serena's mother. I hadn't expected her voice so soon, not when I was still picking up the pieces of my own. I almost let it ring out, almost let it vanish in a voicemail. But something in me, a restless curiosity, made me swipe the screen. "Hello." There was a pause, then Diane's voice, sharp and clipped. "So, I hear you made quite the scene." I closed my eyes, already tired. "Hello to you too, Diane." "You don't need to get smart with me," she said quickly, that defensive edge I'd heard in her countless times before. "I've spoken to Serena. She told me what happened at dinner. You embarrassed her. In front of her friends." I leaned back against the arm of the couch, my jaw tightening. "Is that what she told you?" "That's what she said," Diane replied firmly. "And knowing you, well, you could be dramatic when your feelings are hurt." There it was, the reflexive defense, always ready to shield her daughter, to smooth things over, to blame the other party. I'd lived with it for years in smaller doses. Now it was concentrated, sharp. "Diane," I said slowly, "did she tell you what she said to me?" "She said she was joking. That's her sense of humor. You've known her long enough. You should know not to take it seriously." The words landed like a stone in my stomach. Joking. Humor. The same tired script. "Let me repeat her words for you," I said, my voice steady, deliberate. I spoke them slowly, each one clear, deliberate, impossible to brush aside. She said, "He basically begged me to date him. Look at him, desperate, weak, and lucky I was bored." And when her friends laughed, she kept going. "Honestly, I'm only still with him because I don't have time to train someone new." I heard Diane's breathing shift on the other end of the line, but I didn't stop. And then I added, my throat tight. She looked right at me and said, "No one else even wants him." The silence that followed was so sharp, I could almost hear the seconds ticking on Adrian's wall clock. Finally, Diane whispered, barely audible, She said that?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "Yes," I said quietly. "She said that." For the first time in all the years I'd known Diane Morrison, she didn't have a quick reply. She didn't rush to explain it away or scold me for misinterpreting. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. When she finally spoke again, her tone had shifted, faintly trembling around the edges. "I know my daughter," she said. "I know she can be sharp, but that's not." She cut herself off, as if even she couldn't finish the excuse. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the muted glow of the television screen in Adrian's living room. For years, I'd waited for anyone, to acknowledge what I felt in my gut. That Serena's sharpness wasn't wit. It wasn't charm. It wasn't harmless. It was cruelty. She laughed while she said it. I added, softer now, like it was the funniest thing in the world. Another long silence. Diane's breath hitched. I can't believe, she trailed off again. I could picture her sitting in her tidy kitchen, hand pressed to her forehead, eyes closing as she let the words replay in her mind. When she spoke next, it was with none of the sharpness she began with. Instead, her voice sounded almost small. I didn't raise her to be like that. No, I said gently. But that's what she became. There was a grief in her silence. Grief, not for me, I didn't expect that, but for the image of her daughter she had held on to, maybe without ever really examining it. For Diane, Serena had always been the golden one. Quick with words, bright, charismatic. I wondered how many times she had brushed aside moments like this, dismissing them as her humor, the same way her friends had. I wondered if deep down, Diane knew but chose to look away. The line was heavy with her realization now, fragile and slow. She said that. Diane whispered again, as if saying it twice might make it less true. But truth didn't shrink when spoken. It grew heavier, more undeniable. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because for the first time, Diane Morrison wasn't defending her daughter. For the first time, she was hearing the cruelty for what it really was. And in that silence, long, painful, cracking at the edges, I knew she couldn't unhear it. Chapter 7, The Apology That Isn't. I wasn't expecting her. The morning had been ordinary in the way I craved lately, routine, quiet, a string of small tasks on my office desk that didn't ask anything of my heart. Numbers on a screen, emails to answer, a report half-written. I let the steady hum of work wrap around me, a buffer against the turbulence of the last few days. So when the glass door to my office opened without a knock, I nearly didn't look up. But then I heard her. Can we talk? Serena stood in the doorway, shoulders hunched, eyes red and glistening. She looked smaller somehow, stripped of the sharp edges she always wore like armor. Her makeup was smeared in faint streaks down her cheeks, and the sight of it, the vulnerability I hadn't seen in years, landed in my chest like a stone. I set my pen down slowly. This isn't the place, Serena. I didn't know where else to go. Her voice cracked, and before I could answer, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She didn't sit. She wrung her hands together, nails tapping against her wedding band, as if the metal itself could anchor her. Finally, she said, I'm sorry. The word hung between us, thin, fragile. I studied her face, the way her mouth trembled, the tears threatening to spill. Once upon a time, it would have broken me. I would have rushed to close the gap, to soothe her, to say it didn't matter. But now I just waited. She took my silence as invitation and pressed forward. I shouldn't have said those things at dinner, she whispered. It was stupid. I was trying to be funny, to make them laugh. That's all it was. Just humor. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. My voice came out calm, steady, as if the storm had already passed through me. You think this is about a joke? Her brow furrowed. Well, yes. I said something awful. I admit it. But it was just words. Words don't mean don't. I cut in softly but firmly. Don't tell me words don't mean anything. You didn't just say something cruel. You turned me into a punchline. In front of people you claim as friends. You let them laugh at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. She blinked rapidly, as if searching for the right response. I didn't think. I thought you knew me better than that. I thought you'd understand it was just humor. I finished for her. If that's your idea of humor, then I've been the butt of the joke for years, haven't I? The truth of it landed hard. I could see it in the way her face flickered, guilt tightening around her eyes. She took a shaky step closer. Please, don't throw this away. We can fix it. We've been through worse than this. We can work on it. I'll change. I'll do whatever it takes. I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because the words were so familiar. We can fix it. How many times had I heard that promise, only for nothing to change? How many apologies had been paper thin, plastered over cracks that always split open again? But I didn't laugh. I only shook my head. Do you even hear yourself, Serena? You're not begging for us. You're begging to keep your comfort, your control. You wanted to pretend like this was one bad moment, when it wasn't. It was years in the making. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, she looked like she might collapse. Then she whispered, "So what? That's it? You're just done?" I hesitated, searching for honesty in myself. And when it came, it startled me with its clarity. "I don't know if I ever loved you," I said quietly. The words froze her. I went on before I could stop. "I don't know if what I felt for you was love, or if it was just loyalty. The need to stay, to prove I was committed, to convince myself it was enough." Her eyes widened, filling with tears that finally spilled over. "How can you say that to me?" she whispered. "After everything, how can you stand there and say you didn't love me?" "Because it's the truth." For a moment, the silence was suffocating. The only sound was her breathing, short, sharp, uneven. Then something shifted in her. The pleading in her face drained, replaced by something colder, darker. Her tears dried as quickly as they had come. Her chin lifted, her jaw hardened. And then she smiled, not with warmth, but with a sharp edge I recognized too well. "You'll regret this," she said flatly. It wasn't a plea anymore. It was a promise. "You think you can walk away from me, from us, from everything we built?" Her voice was low now, clipped, laced with venom. "You'll regret leaving me. I'll make sure of it." She turned without waiting for an answer, her heels clicking sharply against the office floor. When the door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoed through the room like a final verdict. And I sat there, alone again, staring at the space she'd just vacated. Her apology hadn't been an apology at all. It had been another performance. Chapter 8, Truth Leaks Out. The days that followed her storming out of my office were eerily quiet. I half expected Serena to launch into her theatrics immediately. Angry phone calls, dramatic texts, messages dripping with manipulation. But nothing came. No words, no footsteps at my door, no sudden appearance at the apartment I was crashing in with Adrian. It was as if she had retreated into the shadows to sharpen her knives. I should have been uneasy, but instead, I found myself breathing easier. My shoulders didn't feel so heavy. For the first time in years, silence wasn't suffocating, it was a kind of freedom. Still, I knew silence never stayed silent for long. One evening, I was sitting on Adrian's balcony with a glass of water in hand, watching the city lights flicker when my phone buzzed. Zara's name lit up the screen. I hesitated before opening it. Zara was Serena's friend first, mine second. Their bond went back years, girls' trips, brunches, endless photo shoots together. If anyone was still firmly in her corner, it would be Zara. But instead of a message, it was a voice note. With a cautious thumb, I pressed play. Her voice filled the quiet night. Soft, careful, almost guilty. "She went too far," Zara whispered. "I can't defend her on this one. You didn't deserve it. None of it. I just wanted you to know that." I sat there, motionless, the phone warm against my ear. For weeks, I had been replaying that dinner scene in my head, wondering if I had overreacted, if maybe I was too sensitive, if somehow the humiliation was something I should have been able to shrug off. But here it was confirmation from one of her closest friends. "She went too far." The words replayed like a bomb. I wanted to reply, to thank Zara, but something in me told me to leave it unanswered. Not out of coldness, but out of instinct. I didn't want to drag her deeper into the mess. Serena's wrath could be vicious, and anyone who sided against her tended to become collateral. So I let Zara's voice note sit in my inbox, untouched, like a small lifeline I could return to whenever doubt crept in. But the real blow, the decisive crack in the facade, came 2 days later. It was mid-afternoon. I was at work again, sorting through files when my phone buzzed with another notification. This time it was Talia. Unlike Zara, Talia wasn't known for diplomacy. She was blunt to the point of cruelty sometimes, a trait Serena adored in her. For Talia to reach out directly to me? That was unusual. Her message was short. "You should see this. You deserve to know." Beneath, it were a series of screenshots. I hesitated before opening them. Like it already told me what they were. Proof. And I wasn't wrong. It was the group chat. The one Serena always seemed glued to. The one she'd laugh at late into the night, muttering snide remarks under her breath. A digital stage where sarcasm was currency. The first screenshot showed Zara typing something about how awkward the dinner had been, how maybe they should change the subject next time. And then, right beneath it, Serena's response. "Please, He's lucky I even gave him a chance. I could have married someone hotter, richer. I settled. He knows it. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep reading. Another screenshot. The way he looked when I said it, God, so pathetic. Like a kicked puppy. I almost felt bad, but come on, it was funny. And another. I swear, sometimes I stay with him just because I don't feel like starting over. It's convenient. That's it. The room seemed to tilt. I set the phone down on the desk, staring at the bland beige wall in front of me. I had thought I was numb already. I had thought nothing she could say or do would surprise me anymore. But this was worse than the dinner. The dinner had been public humiliation. This was private truth. Unfiltered, unashamed. The mask had slipped entirely, and what lay beneath was uglier than I had allowed myself to believe. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Talia. I know she calls it humor, but you should see what she says when she thinks no one else will tell you. I'm not taking sides, but you deserve to see the whole picture. I stared at the words until they blurred. For the first time, I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel rage. What I felt was clarity. The kind of clarity that comes after a storm is already passed, when the debris is all around you and you finally see the wreckage for what it is. She wasn't my partner. She wasn't my ally. She was the architect of my humiliation. And the worst part? She had always been proud of it. When Adrian came home that evening, I showed him the screenshots without a word. He scrolled through them slowly, his jaw tightening, his eyes narrowing. Finally, he exhaled sharply and set the phone down on the coffee table. You needed this, he said. I didn't want it, I muttered. No, but you needed it. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Now, there's no going back. No excuses left. You saw it with your own eyes. I nodded. He was right. For years, I had excused, rationalized, forgiven. But this was undeniable. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that the disrespect wasn't imagined. Proof that the marriage had never been what I told myself it was. I picked up my phone again. My thumb hovered over the contacts list, over the number I had already saved days ago, but hadn't had the courage to dial. My lawyer. The name stared back at me, waiting. And for once, there was no hesitation. No second-guessing. No wondering if maybe things could be salvaged. I tapped the number. As the phone began to ring, I felt it, an unfamiliar lightness in my chest. The weight lifting, the chains loosening. It was over. Finally, truly over. And this time, it wasn't just a decision in my head. It was official. Chapter 9. Social media backfires. The first sign that Serena wasn't finished with theatrics came not in person, not by call, but on my phone. I had been scrolling through the quiet hum of the evening, sipping lukewarm coffee on Adrian's couch, when notifications began pouring in. Mentions, shares, tags, all flooding from social media platforms I had mostly ignored since leaving the house. Curiosity and a faint sense of dread made me click. Serena had posted. Her caption was long, dramatic, and carefully constructed to elicit sympathy. Some people can't handle a strong woman. He's insecure, fragile, and threatened by my confidence. I try to make it work, but some men just can't handle a real relationship. Attached was a polished selfie of her, hair perfect, makeup flawless, smile precise. Every element curated for maximum impact. For a moment, I almost laughed. This was her favorite arena. She had always thrived on attention, applause, and the illusion of control. Within minutes, comments started pouring in. At first, people sided with her. You go, girl. Finally standing up for yourself. Some men just can't handle strong women. You're amazing for speaking up. Ignore him. He doesn't deserve you. The notification alerts pinged incessantly, but I barely moved. Adrian leaned over my shoulder, raising an eyebrow. She's doing the victim thing, I said flatly. Adrian nodded. Classic. She's trying to spin it before people hear your side. And she almost got away with it. For a day or two, Serena's post garnered attention, likes, and shares. She basked in her army of virtual supporters, each comment reinforcing the story she wanted to sell. That I was dramatic, sensitive, overreacting. But the tide began to shift. Someone who had been at the dinner, decided to speak up. They shared screenshots, exact quotes, the words she had flung at me, blunt and unfiltered. The post went viral within hours. He begged me to date him. Desperate, weak, lucky I was bored. Honestly, I'm only still with him because I don't have time to train someone hotter. No one else even wants him. The text was short, simple, but the impact was seismic. I watched the notifications explode again, this time from a different angle. People who had cheered her on were now questioning, scrutinizing, calling out the cruelty. Wow, this is horrible. She laughed while saying this. How narcissistic can someone be? Adrian leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching my reactions like a hawk. See, he said quietly. Truth always has a way of coming out. Serena's followers began dropping by the hundreds. Each unfollow felt like a quiet echo of her unraveling control. The curated image of perfection she had so carefully maintained, strong, confident, untouchable, was cracking in real time. She didn't stay quiet, of course. She posted again, defending herself, attempting to spin the narrative. Stop believing the lies. He's insecure and can't handle me being honest. This is manipulation. But the screenshots, now circulated widely, drowned out her words. People could see the exact phrasing, the laughter in the text, the casual cruelty that no filter could disguise. Friends, colleagues, even distant acquaintances weighed in. Each comment chipped away at the carefully constructed facade she had built over years. I followed her for style tips, not for seeing someone bully her husband. This isn't empowerment, it's emotional abuse. Her image is pure PR. Real people wouldn't laugh at someone like this. Her defenses, polished and rehearsed, now seemed hollow. The social backlash was only the beginning. Within days, word reached her workplace. HR, alerted by a combination of public posts and internal whispers, requested a meeting. Adrian and I watched as her frantic texts came through. I can explain. It's not like it looks. They're exaggerating. It's personal, not professional. I can't believe this is happening. Everyone thinks I'm cruel. Her panic was palpable even through the screen, a sharp contrast to the composed, confident persona she had portrayed online. Sometimes reality doesn't care about the image you've built, Adrian said, and sometimes it comes crashing down all at once. I nodded silently, feeling neither satisfaction nor glee. I didn't want her to fall. I just wanted to be free from the weight of her illusions. The social collapse was a side effect, not a victory. The next wave came in quieter, more insidious forms. Mutual friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out privately, offering sympathy or recounting similar experiences. I never said anything before, one admitted, because I didn't want to get involved. But you didn't deserve that. Nobody does. Emails, private messages, even LinkedIn connections began unfollowing or unfriending her. Her curated life, once sparkling and untouchable online, began to fray at the edges. Serena's posts became defensive, erratic, desperate. She alternated between accusations and fragile apologies, never once acknowledging the truth of her actions. I watched silently, holding my phone loosely in my hand, the glow illuminating my face. There was a strange sense of satisfaction, but it wasn't petty. It was clarity. The woman I had lived with for years, who had made me feel small in her presence, whose words had haunted me even in silence, was finally visible for who she truly was. No more excuses. No more masks. No more curated perfection hiding cruelty. The world had caught up with her. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not the freedom of leaving her, though that was part of it. Not the freedom of legal separation, though that too was important. No, this was a deeper freedom. The kind that comes when reality finally aligns with your intuition. When the lies are stripped away. When the performance crumbles, and you are left simply as yourself, unburdened by someone else's theatrics. Her social media collapse, the comments, the unfollows, the HR notice wasn't revenge. It was confirmation. Confirmation that I had been right to walk away. And it was undeniable. Serena's empire of appearances, carefully constructed over years, was crumbling. Her curated life, her polished posts, her army of cheering followers, none of it could withstand the weight of the truth. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel obligated to explain myself. I just felt free. That night, Adrian and I sat on the balcony again, city lights shimmering below, phone notifications buzzing faintly in the background. "You're okay, right?" he asked casually. I exhaled deeply, a long, steady release. "More than okay. I'm finally unburdened." Adrian nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Good. That's how it's supposed to feel." I glanced down at my phone one last time. The screenshots, the posts, the texts, they were all still there. Testaments of truth, undeniable proof of who she really was. And with that proof, I finally felt like myself again. Chapter 10, Liberation. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, slicing across the kitchen counter of Adrian's apartment in long, narrow beams. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the warmth anchor me. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day I reclaimed my life. The small apartment I had found a week ago felt impossibly modest compared to the sprawling house I had left behind. But that was the point. I didn't need luxury or space. I needed simplicity, control, and the kind of peace that had been absent for years. Adrian was already waiting when I called the leasing office that morning, his usual grin plastered across his face. "Ready to finally breathe on your own?" he asked, elbow resting casually on the doorframe. I nodded, holding the stack of papers with the lease in my hand. "More than ready. It's weird, though. Feels like the first real step I've taken for myself in a decade." "Welcome to adulthood 2.0, he said with a mock salute. The drive to the new place was quiet, punctuated only by the occasional direction from Adrian and the soft hum of the car engine. Every turn and stoplight felt symbolic, each mile taking me farther from Serena's world, from the constant belittlement, from the years where my voice had been small and swallowed. When we arrived, the apartment seemed to greet me. It wasn't fancy, 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living room with a window that overlooked the quiet street, but it felt like a blank canvas. My blank canvas. Adrian carried the first box in, muttering under his breath about the weight. "You really did pack everything?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "I didn't have that much," I admitted. "Most of it was just memories." He snorted. "Memories? Man, you have boxes labeled things Serena couldn't touch and stuff I thought was mine." I laughed softly, shaking my head. I guess I was more sentimental than I realized. As we unpacked, I found myself placing each item carefully, deliberately. The books I had loved, but never opened in peace. The coffee mugs I had hidden at the back of the cupboard. Photos of friends and family that reminded me who I really was. Each placement was like reclaiming a part of myself, a quiet rebellion against years of being ignored, dismissed, and laughed at. Adrian unpacked faster than me, moving boxes with the kind of ease I envied. "You okay with all this?" he asked after a while, pausing on the couch. "I mean, this place is yours now. No Serena, no chaos, no drama." I leaned back against the wall, taking a slow breath. "It's surreal, but it feels right. I can think. I can breathe. I can make decisions for myself without second-guessing how someone else will react." He nodded. "Good. That's exactly what you need." There were moments when I caught myself glancing at the door, half expecting Serena to appear with tears or threats, her voice sharp or soft, depending on the mood she wanted to manipulate. But the door remained closed, and for the first time, I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel the need to react. I felt free. By midday, the bulk of the boxes were unpacked, the apartment slowly transforming from empty rooms to a space that reflected me. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking it all in, feeling a faint smile tug at my lips. "You're doing fine," Adrian said, leaning against the doorframe with a bottle of water in his hand. "You're actually smiling." "Yeah," I said, looking around. I didn't realize how much I'd forgotten what it felt like to just exist in my own space. No judgment, no ridicule. "Exactly. This is yours now, and nobody can touch that." The afternoon faded into evening. I found myself by the window, coffee in hand, looking out at the city streets below. The hum of traffic, the distant laughter of neighbors, the golden hue of the setting sun, it all felt calm. Real, untouched by her manipulations. I reflected on the years I had given to Serena. Loyalty, patience, love, or what I had believed was love. I remembered the dinners, the quiet put-downs, the laughter at my expense, the subtle erosion of my self-worth. And now, I realized that walking away hadn't been an act of weakness. It had been the only act of courage I've been capable of in years. I thought about the wedding ring I had left behind, the notes, the lists, the silent drives through the city at night. Every step had led here. Every small humiliation, every quiet insult had brought me to a place where I could finally stand upright without guilt or fear. Adrian came to stand beside me at the window, his hand brushing my shoulder lightly. "You did it," he said softly. "You left the mess behind. You're free." "I am," I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I had anticipated. "I don't feel sad. I don't feel bitter. I don't even feel regret. I just feel free." He smiled, nodding. "Good. That's exactly where you need to be." I turned my gaze back to the street below. The city moved on without me, and that was exactly how it should be. The world didn't stop, and I didn't need it to. I didn't need to be validated by anyone else, didn't need to justify my feelings, didn't need to explain why I had walked away from contempt disguised as love. I had given years of myself to someone who couldn't see me, appreciate me, or respect me. But now those years weren't wasted. They were the foundation for this new life, this new clarity. Every decision I made in this apartment, from unpacking a single box to placing a coffee mug on the counter, was mine. Every breath I took, unshadowed by judgment, was mine. Every thought, every plan, every quiet smile was mine. It was liberation in its simplest, purest form. I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth fill me as the sun dipped lower. Outside, the city glimmered, unaware of the small dramas and monumental decisions that had led me here. But I didn't need it to know. I didn't need applause or acknowledgement. I had finally reclaimed my dignity. And in that moment, standing in my new place, sunlight fading into soft evening, I felt it fully. Freedom. Not anger. Not revenge. Not grief. Just freedom. The world outside could continue its chaos, its judgments, its noise. I had my space, my life, my peace, and nothing, not her words, not her actions, not the years of belittlement, could touch that anymore. I took another sip of coffee, setting the cup down carefully on the counter, and let the silence settle around me. It wasn't empty. It wasn't lonely. It was just mine. And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled without reservation.